man from Stevenage does it again. Lewis Hamilton is a 4-time world champion. And it was pretty inevitable, judging the fact that Ferrari had lost out form probably since their home Grand Prix. So Lewis Hamilton did what he needed to do. I think he finished in P9 in the Grand Prix after a very, very dodgy start, let's say. Obviously colliding with Sebastian Vettel there, had a puncture, went to the back. He did struggle to overtake the cars, but he got the job done. Vettel tried his best, finished in P4, I think it was. So obviously, I think he needed the top 2. It wasn't enough. Hamilton is a 4-time world champion. Obviously, absolutely incredible. But that's not the main topic for today's episode. Obviously, so then we'll just cast that at the back of our minds. Come back to that later on in the episode. But cast your mind back to 2014 when Lewis Hamilton did win his first world championship with Mercedes, his second at the time, and Mercedes' first constructors championship. And that was the year when the engine regulations changed, let's say for the worst, let's say, bearing in mind it was supposed to be quite a good year. So 2013 was the last season for the V8 engines, a beautiful sound. Obviously, a legendary engine. I think they had them since 2006. I think it was the first year that they used V8s. So, I mean, a very sweet engine, very, well built. Renault on top of the world at this point as well. Mercedes coming through the ranks as well. And then you jump into 2014, and obviously everything changes. They went from V8 to V6 hybrids. So obviously you're going with the times with modern technology moving forward. And everyone thought, okay, let's give it a chance. The engines can't sound, they can't sound that bad. It didn't go down well with the fans whatsoever. Like, it went from really, really good to really, really, like, awful, abysmal, let's say. And loads of teams, especially Renault, fell like a bag of McLaren Hondas. that's how I'm going to put it anyways, just to be kind. And a lot of teams literally just collapsed, and they could not cope with these new regulations. Mercedes, on the other hand, understand it so well that they just dominated the sport for the next 3 years. And obviously this year, not so much dominating it, but they were still ahead of everybody else. So obviously they're still ahead with the regulations, and obviously as well with these new regulations in 2017. So, but when it comes to these engine regulations, it's quite a complicated system as well, and it's quite a cruel system as well. For example, look at how Honda have been doing since 2015. It's just been awful for them. They can't really get the grasp with the new technology that that is required, and obviously all these new rules and regulations as well. It's just putting teams off as well from competing in Formula One and coming into Formula One as well. So what needs doing? Well, luckily for us, we have someone called Chase Carey, Monopoly Man, Sean Bratchett, and Ross Brawn at the helm, and they've introduced brand new engine regulations, hopefully a bit of a kinder one for teams to come in the year 2021. Now, they have listed their plans of what to do on Halloween, so quite scary in my mind. Lyle is still wearing his mask. I would highly recommend him to take it off. But he won't listen to me, but never mind. So, obviously, engine regulations in 2021 currently stand as they will have a 1.6 litre V6 hybrid engine. So, obviously, that's exactly the same as what has been since 2014. Now, one of the bad elements, let's say, about this engine is the sound. So, they've tried many ways. I think they've tried a megaphone, a mega horn, whatever you call it, on the back of the engines, on the back of the exhaust. That went down a treat. It didn't do anything to the sound. And then recently, I think Force India did this microphone altering situations where obviously the engine would sound a bit more high pitched, and it just sounds like a bee stuck in the engine. Look, it sounds absolutely terrible in my opinion. Close, but not the V8s. So obviously, what are they going to do? Well, they've now raised the RPMs, the revs per minute, from 50,000 to 18,000, so obviously raising it by 3,000 revs per minute, hopefully to try and increase the sound. Now, obviously, in the power unit, you have your six little components, such as, and one of them is your MGU-H. Now, this is connected to the MGU-K, which then powers extra, which then stores wasted energy from the engine, and then you can use it as a boost to give your car an extra bit of horsepower. A bit like KERS, if you remember the KERS system. If not, I would highly recommend going to Google the KERS system before you understand how the MGU-K and the MGU-K work. Now, they plan to scrap the MGU-H for 2021, and now this could sort of relieve a bit of pressure on the teams as well. This is now like a less element to sort of work upon. But the other main component, the MGU-K, the motor generator hybrid kinetic, that's how, look there, remember that. Well, now it's going to be they're going to increase it. Now it's going to have more work to do. So obviously, giving the car a bit more, obviously, let's say a bit more power. And obviously one of the best things as well is that the drivers is going to have the opportunity to use that extra source of power whenever they want. So just going back to what KERS was about, KERS was a system where, again, it would store, wasted energy, and the driver could be able to use it at any given point within a lap. Once a new lap was done, the battery was refilled and you could go again. Now, when this new system got put in place, called ERS, the energy recovery system, obviously this is where you think it was able to it would have been able to use more throughout the lap, but the driver couldn't really control when he would want this power. But now, with the more powerful MGUK, the driver can now do that. So obviously going back in time to what KERS used to be, the driver can now be able to use this extra bit of power throughout the lap. Obviously handy for the driver, good for us as well. Obviously, if you do play the games, now at least now you have control of what power to use during the lap. Now, one of the main things besides the engine noise is costs. So we've seen a lot of teams struggle because of the cost. For example, Honda and Renault massively, they're falling to their knees pretty much in terms of how hard it is to try and keep up with demands. Paying for these power units as well. And obviously, it doesn't really suit the other car manufacturers to come into Formula One because it's that expensive. Now they're planning to make these new engines a lot cheaper by also removing the MGUH. Obviously, one less thing to spend upon. And just making the engines, power units rather, more simpler. So hopefully, teams like, Sauber, Haas, Renault can be able to move forward as well, and maybe to spend a bit more money on these power units, unlike the likes of Mercedes, who literally just spend all their money on this power unit, and that's why they're so far ahead, because they have the more money to be able to put the funds, the research in as well. And obviously the same with Ferrari. So hopefully Mercedes won't be just one team dominating the sport because of these new regulations. Maybe some other teams as well, whoever's in the sport then. Obviously Porsche coming in as well, Audi, teams like that as well. Aston Martin as well, for Red Bull fans out there. Obviously they're linked with this. Obviously they'll be watching this quite closely. So obviously reducing the costs. Hopefully the smaller teams can spend a bit more, and obviously the bigger teams can spend a bit less, and then hopefully try and even out the pack. And obviously hopefully we're not seeing just a more dominant sport like we have been. So that's pretty much the main talking points about these new engine regulations. Obviously, if you do want to go and see the rest of them, you can find them on the Formula 1 website, on Sky Sports News, or your any Formula 1 section website as well. So obviously, just to go more in depth. So Lyle, handing over to you now. You've heard me explain just briefly about the main components about these new engine regulations. You've probably seen it for yourself. I mean, from your own opinion, are you happy with what's been offered? Because I think a lot of fans were expecting the 2021 engines to be V8s, but they're not the V6s now. And obviously the new higher revs per minute, making the engines louder. Let's see how it sounds first, but before we jump on the bandwagon. But what's your first opinion when you saw these new engine regulations? Tell us all.
Yeah. I was really happy with it when I first saw them. Now, the sound was a massive problem. I mean, so 2014, I remember in Australia 2014, obviously, for me anyway, I remember getting up, obviously to an early morning race from like 5 a.m. I remember getting up and I remember watching the telly. Obviously, David Croft, the guy in Sky Sports F1, he says, and the 5 lights are on, and away we go. And obviously in 2013, which obviously, was in Albert Park the year beforehand to kick off the year, really, really loud, torturous, really high pitch. We all know the sound of the V8 engine, and this was like, honestly, it was a bit of a joke really. We went down the first corner like a normal car. There was other things like that,
turn up
like
TV.
for example, like you were looking for the remote and you were thinking like, I'm actually sitting on the mute button, like have I turned it down by accident. Other things like you could hear the pit in the pit lane, they blow like a whistle, like a normal, like a football whistle, just to say like a car's coming. You could hear that. You could hear the tyre squeal. You could hear the wheel guns. You could hear the crowd over the cars. Honestly, there was so many things that weren't very good. They tried to improve the sound for Malaysia, as John said, with the horns and things like that, but there was no real, change about it. And I think we've just kind of got used to it, because and the exhaust got bigger, and I think we've just kind of got used to it and said, that's the best we're going to get. To be honest, actually, when you go to a race, like for example, obviously, me and John went to Silverstone last year, and we went to Monza earlier this year, a few races ago. When Formula One comes about, you don't need earplugs. And it's, for example, like the start as well, it's quite, you can sit there, and I think even if you can, obviously we were almost next to it, you can put, you can kind of, you can live with that sound. We're going to say the V8, very loud, obviously they're using it, for example, the V10s. I mean, it was great though, but obviously in those days you needed earplugs. So the sound is a good thing. I'm glad that they're improving that. But obviously, as you said, John, the best thing about this is the MG UK that they're bringing in, kinetic power, because as he was saying about the KERS, I just want to go into a little bit more detail about that also. 2012 was one of my best seasons, and the best season I've lived through. Like we've actually been alive to see. Yes, obviously 7 different winners, 7 different races, really good, and that becomes down to like the regulations and things like that. Obviously the V8 was still there, really loud, really torturous cars, but the big thing is you had the KERS and you had DRS, and they both worked hand in hand, especially in qualifying, because the DRS now you need just the DRS activation zones, for example 2 on a circuit at least, so obviously you have to wait until you're in there. After that you can't. In 2012 and in 2011 you could use it whenever you wanted on a circuit, so honestly it was up to the driver, because obviously as they know there's a bit of a line between like what does the driver do and what does the team do. This was solely on the driver, especially qualifying. That's why I think qualifying back in 2012 was basically like bliss, and that's why we saw things like Pastor Maldonado qualifying in second place in Spain, and then obviously moving up because of Hamilton's disqualification in qualifying. That's why we saw kind of obscure things like that. I think Checo Perez came third in Canada in qualifying. We saw Grosjean also up there. That's why we saw these kind of things, because it was the drivers doing all this, because they had all these aids going for them, but obviously they were pulling out of the bike because it was all the drivers' things to do. So as I say, obviously the DRS did it all their own, but the best thing was the KERS. As John said, it was about 10 seconds of power, which was about 60 to 80%, 80 brake horsepower, more power, especially at low speeds that they needed. Almost like somebody giving you a bit of a push, especially on the start. So drivers used to do that on the start, especially you had teams like Marussia and Caterham, they used to use it, obviously, trying to contest with the other ones, and if anything, it actually worked. That was amazing, and reset every lap. So the drivers, basically, it was so exciting, and as I say, it was all the drivers. The teams could only advise, but it was up to the drivers when they used KERS, and obviously, as I say, when they used DRS in qualifying. So the MG UK, I'm really excited to see what that can do, because it's going to be like KERS, as Jordan said, and that was one of the best things I think about Formula 1. The engine components, especially the MG UH, again, that's another big thing, because this cost... The cost, the money that comes into teams, yes, it's only fair. It's only fair across the board that obviously if you are more successful, you make at least a little bit more. You make a lot more money. I don't think Formula One's ever going to get to a point where we're all going to shake hands and be buddy and go, Mercedes are going to get the same money as Sauber. Unfortunately, that is not going to happen. But this makes it more fair, because we take out this big component. That, to be honest, was a bit of like a downside, because it was like we didn't really see it work. We also saw the cars, for example, like I'll give an example, like Baku, the main, obviously the long straight in Baku. A lot of the teams, in the races especially, you'd see like the red lighting up at the back. That's when the ERS system, that's when the MGUH was charging, so that the ERS system, as I say, was getting more full, and it could give this burst of energy. Also, the drivers couldn't control when this would happen. The team could. So really, as I say, it was more about the teammate than the drivers, obviously, as KERS was a few years ago. So I think that's good, that it's just one less thing for all the teams to worry about in terms of cost, because obviously as you said, John, with Mercedes and Ferrari and Red Bull, when they take all this money, they'll spend it on components, especially Mercedes, and I think they already have the best drivers, they already have the best publicity. It's almost like one other factor that Sauber and all the, not really Sauber, even like Force India, and that must be thinking like, obviously they have good drivers. So if there's a chance that they can compete with Mercedes, which obviously they're doing quite well in the races, they will do it. But when it comes to money and things like that, it's almost impossible that teams like teams like Force India and teams like Williams are actually going to be competing with Mercedes. They make the most money. They're going to invest it in things like the MGUH, components, obviously reliability on the car for aerodynamics, things like that, driver aids, and obviously working on the internal combustion engine, obviously the hybrid V6. So that is, they can't really compete with them in a money way. And if anything, that was another like a problem with Formula One. That money, that was to fight over cover, that was also a regulation. To be honest, money could be a regulation, because it's almost like, as I said really in that point, you know, money, there's a big difference between who has that money, and that's one of the things that you can't control. If you don't have as much money as Mercedes and they're investing it in, you know, better things for their car, it's almost impossible to compete with them. So as we scrap the MGU-H, that's one less component. Obviously on the car, you know, for the teams to worry about in terms of money. We get the MGU-K in, which goes down to the drivers. Obviously, yes, you'll be investing in it, yes, you'll be working on it, things like aerodynamics and everything like that. I mean, yes, you know, money is a big thing in Formula 1, but with the MGU-H going, that's just one less thing for the teams to worry about. So I think with the engine regulations, all in all, I'm very happy with them. I think that the teams will be very happy with them as well. Yep. Obviously the three guys that are in charge, obviously Chase, Sean and Ross, as you said, you know, they're almost doing it to try and attract, you know, more like brand into Formula 1. Obviously we'll talk about that a little bit more later on in the episode. Obviously, you know, bigger things coming in, for example, Aston Martin and maybe other car manufacturers coming into Formula 1. So they're doing it on to keep everybody happy, and I think that they kind of have done that, because it was a big thing to say. You know, on this kind of one day, they were going to be deciding, or on this one day they were going to be releasing the engine specs for 2021. And I mean, obviously, for example, like 2010, we saw a change in the regulation that lasted for 3 years. You know, and things like that. So, you know, it's between, let's say, about 3 and 5, 6, 7 years. So from 2021 to let's even just say 2030, it's a long time to have some regulation in that, you know, people aren't very happy with. So I think they've done quite a good job, you know, with changing all the things. I'm really happy. Cars are going to be louder, which obviously is definitely what we want. The V6s, though, that's like environmentally friendly now. That was definitely a way to go forward. So when you said it at the start, John, I don't think I was expecting us to go back to V8s. Maybe in 2014 I was, because obviously we were like, you know, we don't really understand that much, you know, about like, you know, what you know, what we want in the car. We just want them to be louder. Obviously the V6 are faster as well. You know, they are actually faster. You know, I mean, obviously we got some tracks, for example, like Mexico, we saw the qualifying time smashed. We saw the qualifying time smashed in Suzuka. Many tracks, especially Brazil as well, obviously coming up, you know, at the high altitude circuit. It even might be beaten again this year. I remember in the first year in 2014, it was by, I think it was either Bottas or Massa, but it was one of the Williams guys smashed it, because obviously, as I say, higher altitude, engine works better at that, and you know, they beat the time. So the V6 fine, make them louder, and I'm really looking forward to 2021. It really should be a good thing. And to be honest, it's like John is like, what's the time now? It's, you know, it's just November 2017. It's like got a long way to wait, but it'll be good. It'll be a good thing to look forward to, because if they release like some, you know, ridiculous engine regs, then it'll be like, oh, I'm not looking forward to 2021 in Formula 1 at all. And obviously, just one last thing, obviously we have the Halo, remember, in 2018. So obviously Formula 1 at the moment isn't at like a point where, you know, it's like it's looking forward to the future, is it? So at least we have this kind of thing to look forward to. Are you happy, John? Are you happy with the regulations that are coming in? Are you happy with that? Obviously, louder cars, and they do look really well. Louder cars, you know, the kinetic, obviously, kind of like cars. That's my best thing anyway. Are you looking forward to the new regulations?
I'm excited to see what they're going to look like. Well, certainly what they're going to sound like, because I want the sound to be a racing sound. Now, one of the things that I've noticed is when these regulations got announced is that a lot of people are expecting the V8 type of, you know, regulations and sounds. Everyone is expecting to go back to the V8s and V10s and V12. Well, not expecting, but that's what everybody wants, and it's not going to happen. V6s are the way forward. It's because what they're trying to do is that they're trying to bring back excuse me. They're trying to bring back, you know, the love of the sound, because the sound is one of the crucial things when you're at a Grand Prix as well. It's, you know, it's one of the unique, obviously sounds in, like, you know, like maybe like a kid's life or like your own life as well. You know, you instantly hear a Formula 1 car whiz past. The sound just goes through you. It's like a drug essentially. Like, oh, that just felt so good. You know what I mean? But when you hear the V6s, it's like, wait there, what is this? Because if you heard that noise before you heard the V8s, you would prefer the V6s because you're used to that. So obviously, and then if you went to V6 to V8s, then you're going to go, the V8s are too loud. So, you know, it's trying to have a balance. And that's obviously, now we've had the V8s first into the V6s. The V6s are quieter. You're trying to feed yourself upon that okay, I want that sound back because that's the noise I know and love. And with this, I don't know and love it as well. And so this is what they're trying to do. They've got to be very, very careful in how they plan this, because it's like Lyle said as well. These regulations could be until the next 10 to 15 years, and if they get it wrong within the first year, we are going to lose a lot of fans. A bit like in 2014, when obviously the quieter engines, the more uglier cars, everyone was like, where are we going with this? What is going on? And then I think we lost quite a lot of fans. And within time, everything has improved. The cars look a bit better this year, but obviously there is certainly more improvement as well. Yet again, a bit like with the design with the cars, everyone's like, they're good, but they're not like old school type. And we're not going to go back to that. We're not going to go back in time. But what they are going to try and do is try to modify it so that we almost feel that love as well that we used to have. But it's just not going to happen. It's like growing up in life essentially. It's like when you get to about in your mid-30s, and then you have like a school reunion, then like, you try and have a laugh and a bit crack with your old school with your old school friends, but it's not going to be the same. So you're just trying to feed off that drug that you've been off for a while. This is what it is like essentially. So it's the same with us, Lyle. We love the V8s back in the day. So the V6s now within 2021 hopefully should give us a bit of a kind of like a nostalgic sound, a bit of a nostalgic feeling to what it was back then. I'm excited for these. I'm very happy that they've actually come to some sort of agreement about cheaper engines as well. That's another thing as well. Cost is massive thing in Formula One, and I think Lyle, I think you've actually brought up a very debatable point at one stage we could talk about is should costing be a regulation as well? Should teams have a cap as to how much they can spend, so teams like Mercedes can sort of reduce their costs, and then maybe the teams like Sauber and Haas as well, the lower teams can sort of catch up in a way and have a very more competitive Formula One. But that's obviously to do with sponsorships as well. That's to do with advertising as well, in everything and all that. So I think that's going to be a bit of a struggle as well. But obviously I would say that is a very, very good point. I think the cost of a Formula One car these days is about £6 million. That's just to make it, and that's excluding team facilities as well, wind tunnels as well, traveling as well, staff, drivers, sponsorships, all that kind of thing, all comes into it as well, logistics as well. So it is extremely expensive. So hopefully reducing the costs might make it a bit easier for teams to manage it, as well.
I think also, John. So I think that the cost, it reminds me of a little bit like, well, for example, like the transfer window this year that's just gone over the summer. Obviously, Paris bought. Sorry,
it just went mental. Yes.
Paris bought Neymar for about £200 million, and that moment was almost like, obviously, football is really expensive. Obviously, teams splash out the cash so much, and obviously that's why. Well, for example, obviously Manchester United, one of the richest teams in the world, Barcelona, one of the richest teams in the world. That's why they have such great players. But when they did that, when they bought Neymar for that amount of money, that was almost like a ridiculous amount of money. And then almost every single person in the transfer window that was going had about another 10 million, 20 million, 30 million pound added to what they were originally going to buy. For example, like that, obviously like Philippe Coutinho, for example, for Liverpool, he didn't go, but originally he was going to go for about 60 million to Barcelona. As soon as Neymar went, that went up to about 120, 130, and that's when all this talked about more money, and then all the smaller clubs who couldn't afford that amount of money. For example, like there might be one team who could afford 60 million for Coutinho if they wanted him, but then as soon as it went to 130, it was like, oh well, we can't afford him now. And that's a little bit like Formula One. That's a little bit like the teams. It's a little bit like Force India saying that, well, we could have bought that for 60 million pound, but now it's gone up to 130. We can't. But then there's Mercedes, who are like the Manchester United in this debate. We're like going, oh well, we can buy it, and we can buy this, and we can buy that, and there's just money. We don't really have to worry about that anymore. And that's what's excluding the other guys. It always was like that, but obviously, for example, I think now, like the transfer window, the money is getting a little bit out of hand in Formula One. So obviously, as we've been saying there, if there was a cap in the money spending side, that would be really great. But obviously, there's a lot of caps, like John said about advertisements and things like that, what the drivers bring, what the drivers bring, like their sponsorship and things like that. Because obviously, like Mercedes, for example, they have about 50, 60, 70 sponsors that range from things like the Bose headphones to, like the Schaffhausen watches to everything. I mean, you see Lewis Hamilton on everything, doing everything. Like he's on the L'Oreal adverts and things like that. You know what I mean? So it's like they've got all this. And then Marcus Ericsson and Pascal Wehrlein, they are not doing adverts with like Nike and things like that. I don't even know what sponsors they have. I mean, that would be good though. You know what I mean? That would be good to say like we are sponsoring Sauber. I think
they've got a Swedish watch sponsor. I've seen a couple of their watches. They look quite nice as well. But I think that's like one of their main sponsors as well.
I know Chelsea used to sponsor Sauber. In 2012, they had a big sticker of Chelsea Football Club on the front of their car. I remember that. So I don't know. Maybe I haven't really heard much about that. But I remember.
Reading Football Club and Marussia, they had a sponsorship as well back in 2013 as well. I remember that highly as well. So maybe get football and Formula 1 involved with the smaller teams as well, and hopefully try and boost them a bit as well. It did help. It helped Sauber in a way, because remember Sauber in 2012 had an absolutely stellar of a season. In 2013 it didn't really go to plan as well. So, and obviously with Manor as well, I think 2013, 2014, were kind of average years. They weren't like, always at the, well, they were always at the back, but they were always, they weren't like feeling like what McLaren, let's say what McLaren and Honda are as well. So, well, obviously that's what we think about the regulations. Obviously, as always, let us know what you think of the regulations as well. But final question on this, overall subject. Now, as we've mentioned before about teams coming in, one of them will be Aston Martin. I say teams, car manufacturers. Aston Martin are coming into Formula 1 next season as a title sponsor of Red Bull. So obviously Aston Martin, Red Bull Racing from 2018. But from 2021, they are coming in to power Red Bull. So will then this lead another train of car manufacturers? Example, Porsche. They're looking for a new home after leaving LMP1. So where are they going to go? I think Renault have pulled the plug on the Formula E project. Nissan's coming into that, so maybe Nissan could have a bit of a put their foot in the water, let's say, and try out the water in Formula 1 because of this regulation. I mean, do you think that a lot of car manufacturers will follow suit with Aston Martin and come into Formula 1 because of these kind of regulations as well? Or do you think, no, I think everyone is still going to go with Formula E. Formula E still has the upper hand. What do you think?
Yeah, it depends what kind of motion that they can make. It depends what kind of like noise they can make. For example, like Audi and Porsche, in the WEC, for example, they didn't run it, but they were massive teams, and they had a lot of influence and things like that. They were the team really, and they took control of the team. They weren't just an engine supplier. And with Aston Martin and Red Bull, I think that Red Bull are going to kind of say like, yeah, we are a strong team. Obviously, in terms of their brand, they're really strong. They have all this money. Hence, obviously, we saw in 2010 to 2013, obviously their domination because they had a great car, they had a great backing. And Aston Martin, I think Red Bull and Aston Martin have a great sponsorship, have a great agreement where Aston's gonna come in and they are going to be like really friendly, really pally. And if it's just going to become Aston Martin, Red Bull, and obviously Aston Martin are going to take control of the team, I think they will be very happy to do that, and obviously I'd be very happy to do that as well. Aston Martin, fantastic brand. Obviously they've made James Bond's cars since the 1950s. Obviously it is a really big, especially a British legacy. So I'm really happy about that. Also Aston Martin, really really great. They're on the new shirt for Red Bull. Well, they are this year. Obviously they were for them last year. I don't know why we didn't get ours. It was really annoying that. But I'm really looking forward to Aston Martin coming in. If Audi and if Porsche were going to come in, it's like, yeah, but maybe they want to kind of try and look to join another team. And when I say another team, I don't mean like, for example, Mercedes. I don't know how that would really work because Mercedes are an engine supplier. So it would be like engine Porsche. But, well, for example, like Force India. So if Audi, let's say, because I like Audi, if Audi were going to come up and if they were going to come into Formula 1 and they were saying, right, we're going to create our new team, new sponsorship, we are going to be our new, team, like at the bottom of the grid, competing with Mercedes and that would be good. But I think it would be much better if they were going to say something like, we'll kind of join ship with Force India and then we'll become Force India Audi. Obviously, then it'll become a Force India Audi engine. and then Audi will sponsor Force India. They'll get loads more money, as I say, new engine, a sole engine, obviously, instead of just being like, another partnership of a Mercedes branded engine. They'll obviously get they'll get a brand new engine, Audi, which obviously they'll focus all the time in, a bit like Renault Sport with Red Bull Racing, and I think that would be better for Formula One if more came in. I remember a few episodes ago, we were talking about, with Audi and Porsche and things like that come in and just start their brand new team. So I think that would work. Yes, obviously Aston Martin, fantastic. And it depends how they'll do. Obviously, the world will definitely be watching Aston Martin and see how they do with Red Bull. But if Audi or someone like that were going to join with Force India, that would be great. And Force India Audi, I'm saying that's going to happen in the next few years. I don't know why Force India, and I don't know why Audi, but I don't know, it just sounds cool to say, you know what I mean? So Jordan, you, obviously Aston Martin, Red Bull, great name, great sound. But yeah, as I said, do you think like Porsche and these kind of teams will join Formula One either with a team or starting their own team?
I think they will. I would say first of all, I don't think we'll be expecting any teams coming in, into the suit, because obviously, as like we were saying, it is quite expensive to still run your own team, to start up your own team. You still got to try and get your head around these regulations as well. So obviously that could put the teams off as well. Not only just the engine, but obviously the overall design of the car. I mean, obviously that will be no problem for them, but obviously Formula One is a totally different sport to what LMP1 is. So obviously you've got to take that into consideration as well. But I think Aston Martin, once they come into Formula One, I think we will see Porsche. I think they'll say, right, we are going to power, I don't know, let's say Haas in 2022. Then, like, I don't know, Audi might say, right, we're going to power such and such. Force India, let's say, in 2024, and then who knows? They might go, right, we're going to go with Force India. Then all of a sudden they might go from Force India Audi to Audi Formula One. So and then obviously just like kind of take over that own team as well. I'm not too sure how it'll work, but I certainly do hope that a lot more car manufacturers will come into Formula One because of these new regulations as well. But as always, let us know your opinions in the comment section below. Will this attract more teams, more car manufacturers in this beautiful world of Formula One? Because I certainly hope it does. I'm pretty sure that you guys do as well. But obviously, just before we finish the episode, back to probably the biggest story of the week, or second biggest story of the week, depending on how you look at these regulations, is obviously Lewis Hamilton, our home driver, is a 4-time world champion. Now, Lyle, let us think in for a minute. Because we remember when we were growing up in Formula One, when we started to understand what Formula One was about, Lewis Hamilton was a young, hopeful driver who had won a championship, could have won 2 back in 2007. He was under a bit of pressure at McLaren, not doing as well. It was up against, not really so much against Sebastian Vettel, but obviously it was more McLaren versus Red Bull back in them days. He obviously just won his one and only championship. Everyone was like, how, is Hamilton really as good as what we thought he was going to be? People were saying he's a good driver, but he hasn't got the car. Now we're sitting here, he's a 4-time world champion, the most pole position sitter of all time, the most successful British driver of all time, obviously only British driver to have 4 world championships, 62 wins, 72 pole positions. Wow, that's incredible. It doesn't matter if you're a fan or not. We are massive fans of Lewis Hamilton, but it's just crazy to see how far he's came from when we were growing up in Formula One to now, when he's a 4-time world champion, joining that elite group of drivers, and we are pretty damn sure he's going to win probably maybe 5, 6, 7, 8.
There's no stopping him. No, there really isn't. I think Lewis is. I think in his mind, I think he's going to try and get to 91 or over 91, obviously, which is Michael Schumacher's wins.
That's achievable without a doubt. He can definitely get. I don't care what he says. He'll go.
Yeah, if he says,
I'm going to take it race by race. Shut up, man. You know fine well you can beat his record. 100 wins.
But that's the thing, though, Jordan. It's like this year for Lewis Hamilton. Obviously, he's taken so many records. He matched Ayrton Senna, and he beat Ayrton Senna's record. Obviously, remember he got a helmet in Canada. He matched Michael Schumacher's, beat Michael Schumacher's pole position record. He's had the most front row lockout. He's had the most front row appearance. I think it was 115. He's left, right, and centre all these records that he's broken. Mercedes, obviously constructors. That was it's not inevitable, obviously, because you need two drivers great in him. Valtteri Bottas has definitely pulled his weight. 11 out of 10 for him, and obviously when we get to things like reviewing the whole season, well, you'll have to see what we say about him. But spoiler alert, it's going to be good unless obviously he makes a massive error. If he does a Grosjean / Maldonado in Brazil and Abu Dhabi, but it's going to be good from him. But Hamilton, really, really great. And I was saying to Jordan also as well. I mean, it's the fact that Lewis Hamilton has it's the second part of the season. He's just turned his form on like a tap. He was great in the first part of the season, but it was looking like he was going to be Ferrari. Vettel led the World Championship from Australia to about Singapore, I think. So it was like it was looking like it was going to be Ferrari's year, Seb's year. Lewis was great. Valtteri had a few wins, but Lewis was still good. But the second part, Lewis was like 2010, let's say 2011, 2012 with McLaren at that point. But then this year, it's almost been like 2007 McLaren. So you remember, great start. Probably one of the best starts I've ever seen a rookie driver do. It's part of 2008 McLaren, 2014 Mercedes, and even battling with Nico Rosberg, because this. All combined in one, because the second part of the season, this part, I know Seb's had a few bad looks, but Lewis has really been formidable. And I also remember Japan, probably one of my favourite races that Lewis did this year. Amazing race that he did on the Sunday, but I always remember the Saturday when he did that lightning performance in qualifying, smashed the record around the circuit, which obviously, remember, Suzuka, one of the older circuits, obviously it has a lot of drivers who've competed against there. I always remember that was one of the best races, and I say Lewis, he's done a great job, and he definitely deserves his fourth World Championship. Great battling with Vettel also, but I mean he just turned on his performance like a tap, hasn't he, Jordan? I mean, this has been a good form by Lewis, especially in the second part of the season, hasn't it?
Without a doubt, you know what I mean. I think you knew that Ferrari was going to be competitive. The signs were there in pre-season, without a doubt. Ferrari were definitely back. However, we didn't know how good they would be, because if you remember in 2016, they had a very pacey car in pre-season, but when it came to the season, they flopped massively. They didn't win a single race, and obviously Ferrari and Vettel stamped their authority on the championship and go, right, we are here to compete and beat Mercedes at their own game as well. Let's not forget that, guys. And we were all like, this is the battle we've been wanting to happen. However, it did die down from the Italian Grand Prix, let's say, because Hamilton, that's when he led the championship by 3 points. Then it just increased and increased and increased and increased. It just got better and better and better. Singapore was definitely a turning point for Ferrari. They could have won that race easily. They could have won the Japanese Grand Prix easily. But however, it just wasn't meant to be. It's just one of the things in Formula One. Now, Ferrari, obviously, everyone will look back at that and go, what could have been? But now, everyone is saying this weekend that Lewis Hamilton could have been a 6-time world champion at this stage, from 2007 when he lost the championship by a point, and obviously in 2016 when he lost the championship to Nico Rosberg. I'm not too sure how many points that was, but I know it was quite close. Obviously went down to literally the last corner, if you remember that, guys. But it's all about what could have been and what might have been. But that's Formula One in general. So if you want to be involved in the sport, you've got to try and understand, right, what could have been. So I think.
And just one last thing, John. Sorry. One last thing as well before we end the show. Verstappen's win, I've got to say, that was on par with things like a Vettel win back in the Red Bull days. That was a Hamilton win at Mercedes. It was one of those races where I saw like the time difference was like 14 seconds, 15 seconds, leading people like Valtteri Bottas, Sebastian Vettel, Kimi Raikkonen was really, really strong. I would say his best win this year, on kind of battle in 2016 Spain, I'm not too sure, but definitely his best win this year. Wouldn't you agree, John?
A very dominant drive by Max Verstappen as well. Obviously, what happened to him at the previous Grand Prix, at the US Grand Prix, got taken off the podium for cutting the corner. Very, very debatable topic. Obviously, go and check out the previous episode 76. We discussed that. We discussed that. Go into more detail about what we think of the matter as well. But Max Verstappen is certainly showing signs of a world champion. A future world champion without a doubt. He's still got a couple of years before he can become the youngest world champion, before he can become the youngest pole position record setter. So there's a lot to come from this young lad after having a very poor start of the season. If I think they said if the season had started, Red Bull would have been. I think Verstappen would be either level or just ahead of Lewis Hamilton in the championship. If it had started from, I think it would have been about the Japanese Grand Prix. I think it would have been. So obviously Red Bull obviously on exceptional form. But let's not forget, guys, they did this last season, and then we all thought they were going to be back this season, and they weren't. So I think next season it is definitely shaping up to be a very, very competitive season. Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel both on four World Championships. Decider who gets the fifth. You know, Alonso stay in front of the year. Can McLaren, Renault, win again? Can McLaren win again? Can Alonso win again? Can he fight for the championship? Can he get 3? What can Red Bull do? Can Max Verstappen win a few more races? Have a good shout at the championship? Ricardo, his future, it's not. Where's he going to go in 2019? Very, very, I don't know. Nobody knows where he's going to go. Can he win a championship with Red Bull? Only time will tell. But obviously, guys, this is where we're going to wrap up this episode. Thank you very much for watching as well. It's been an absolute pleasure. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well. Obviously, comment your opinions about anything that was spoken about in this episode, such as obviously the 2021 regulations. Are you happy with them? Are you disappointed with them? Let us know what you think. Lewis Hamilton, 4-time world champion. If you're a fan or not, let us know what you think about that in the comment section below. But anyways, guys, we've been there for the debate show, and until next time, we'll see you later.
See you later.